So this is an FM system. You can see on this side it says connect and this side says check. And there's a mute button right here. So this is to connect to a child's hearing aids. So this only works if the child has a hearing aid. So it connects to specific frequencies and to a specific child's hearing aid. And so the speech or language teacher or the audiologist will normally hook this up for you. And then when you talk into the microphone in this part, the teacher talks in here and the sound goes directly to the child's hearing aids. And so then that child in your classroom can hear you from anywhere in the room, even if they're in the back, if they're across the room, even if, especially on the playground, I've noticed it's really helpful because if you have a child that maybe isn't always safe for certain things, it's easy to kind of talk to like, hey, be careful or stop, or especially if they have hearing aids and they're not really sure safety-wise. And then it's also helpful because it just helps them hear the sounds correctly and hear the language. If the child's not hearing the language correctly, or if it's muffled, or if it's not very loud, they're not going to develop that language. And so it's really important that they hear that language, especially from their teacher, and hear directions. Otherwise, they're not going to develop that language correctly. And so it goes with all of those standards for speaking and listening in Common Core, the ones that are participating in a group discussion, and having diverse partners and having that back and forth conversation is really only possible when, one, they can hear you, and two, they hear it to be able to reiterate that language back to you. It also helps because it blocks out all the other noise, so it goes directly to their hearing aids, which again is really helpful to create a good environment for them to hear and to hear it correctly. So this is a pencil grip. There are many different types of pencil grips out there, all serving similar purposes of just making sure the student is holding their pencil correctly, and sometimes giving students a little more stability, a little more strength if they're lacking the strength to hold the pencil, or the coordination. It kind of shows them how until their fingers are kind of trained in the right way. So this is the one where it has little holes for your fingers. So there's a T there, and that's for student to put their thumb, and then their other two fingers go as so they're learning how to hold the pencil and pinch it correctly, and not relying so much on these fingers, because a lot of students tend to use like their whole hand and fist it, and this pencil grip will make that impossible. My student right now is really good at using this. He took to it right away. He understands how to hold it, and because it's so easy, there's only 3 holes and they just put their fingers in and they got it. And then it also helps because they can kind of rest their hand on the paper, and it adds more stability and strength. A lot of times I'll have my students hold something in these fingers to prevent them from using them. So they're only using those 3 fingers, the tripod grasp. And this fits with a lot of standards for writing, including just simple standards such as writing their ABCs, the California Common Core English Language Arts Standards. Says to print all upper and lowercase letters, so this helps them to be able to do that more correctly and with the correct formation. The next assistive technology device is a timer. Timers are really helpful mostly for behavior issues in your classroom, but also just for general classroom functioning. I think every class would benefit from some type of timer. Helps kids kind of learn how to self-manage and self-manage their time. So they're pretty easy to use. You can set it for 1 minute or up to an hour, which is all the way around. It's good because this one's very good because it's visual. There's lots of different timers out there that would just have numbers or look like a clock or whatever. And this is really helpful because even if the kids have no idea what the numbers mean, they know that as the red gets smaller, that's less time they have. So it's good for kids who might not understand numbers yet. They can just focus on the color. And so it helps kids who are struggling to transition. It kind of preps them. They can see that, okay, I only have 10 minutes. Okay, I only have 5 minutes. Okay, I only have 1 minute. So they are kind of able to self-manage themselves without you having to remind them all the time. And they might still need some of those verbal reminders, but it's a good way for eventually them to learn how to remind themselves by looking at the timer rather than relying on you. It also creates that less words for the teacher to have to say. Instead of when students ask, how long do we have, or are we almost done, or all those questions kids might ask, you can just point to the timer, and eventually, they'll look at the timer instead of asking you, which is always a great thing, one less thing for teachers to do. It also helps kids who struggle with task completion. The kids that might kind of try to escape the work, you can say, okay, you have to work for 5 minutes, and you have to work for that whole time. Or if they're just having to complete a task, you have 5 minutes to complete this task, or 20 minutes or 10 minutes, giving them something they can complete in that time, to motivate them that they only have that time. And if they don't finish, maybe they don't earn their reward that they're working for, or they have to do it later during a more fun time, or whatever, however you run your classroom. But it's a good thing for kids who kind of try to escape the work. You can show them that the work will be done at some point in time. It also helps students with stamina, the kids who feel like, oh my gosh, I can't sit for this long, or I can't work for that long, and you can show them, okay, you only have to work for this long, and then there's recess, or then there's whatever the next maybe fun thing is. And so that helps a lot of my students. And again, less talking for me. I can just say, oh, we have 20 minutes every time, every center is 20 minutes, so you have to work for that time. And eventually they get used to it, and they know, and they can look at the timer and do it all themselves. And that's the goal eventually, is for them to become more independent and be able to self-manage their time. So overall, it helps them to help kids transition, help kids to self-manage, help with those who maybe get distracted, and can keep them a little more focused when they know they have somewhat of a time limit. And also replacing maybe kids who get upset with transitions, of being more prepared for those transitions. So overall, this helps with behavior issues and just coping in the classroom and learning those classroom strategies. So this, I think, is a really good device, and you can get them in all different sizes and different kinds, which help because some students might benefit from a different type, and that's okay. But specifically, I like this one just because it's so visual, and that when it does get to 0, it dings, which is nice too, that little sound. And again, a very visual timer.